This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alex Masfer. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Before I start talking about anything, I want to remind you guys to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, so you get those alerts on your phone, laptop, however you may be listening, and you never miss an episode when we release them. Also, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. We also really appreciate that. And follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever you have on social media, we do as well. We love to interact with you guys there. I hope wherever and however you may be listening, you and your family are happy and healthy during the current world we are living in. And let's just get right into it. We have a fantastic show for you guys today. A little bit later on, I'm going to be talking about Tom Brady, an interesting quote that came out that he said to his throwing coach, and a little bit talking about the Patriot Way. I'm going to be talking about some Aaron Rodgers. Another interesting quote came out around him, about him and his relationship with the Green Bay Packers. And stick around to the end of the episode. I'm going to be giving you my top 10 NFL rosters on paper. The top 10 NFL rosters, not a top 10 NFL teams, top 10 NFL rosters on paper. Who has the most talent in the league. So stick around for that. That list will be coming at the end of the episode. But we're going to start off today's episode with some basketball. So yesterday, the NBA came out with their schedule release on who's going to be playing the 8 regular season games that each team will play who qualified for the Orlando bubble before going into the playoffs, fighting for those last playoff spots, specifically in the West. And so with that schedule release came who has the toughest and the easiest schedule in the NBA for the last remaining 8 games, and I found it absolutely fascinating. I told you guys about a couple of episodes ago that when I was saying who did I believe would make the playoffs in the West in that 8th seed, I said it was going to be the New Orleans Pelicans led by Zion Williamson. Not necessarily just because I think they're super talented, super young. They are, obviously, and I believe that. I also believe that the NBA will do everything within its power to make sure Zion Williamson is playing playoff games. And what do you know? When the schedule was released, who has the easiest schedule out of anybody? The New Orleans Pelicans, by a long shot, have the easiest schedule remaining out of any of the NBA teams that qualified. Then you look at some of the harder schedules. Who else has a hard schedule? The Memphis Grizzlies have a top 5 one of the hardest schedules remaining. So do the Phoenix Suns, and so do the Portland Trailblazers. Those are three of the teams. The Grizzlies are the 8th seed. Portland and Phoenix are also competing for that 8th seed with New Orleans to be that last team in the playoffs in the West. And the New Orleans Pelicans have an easy schedule by far. It's not even close when you look at percentage points on who has the easiest schedule out of the remaining games. And this isn't a surprise to me at all. The NBA wants Zion Williamson to play. Zion Williamson is box office. When he went to Duke, the ratings went up. He blew up. If you remember in high school, Zion Williamson blew up at Spartansville. That's in one of the, I think, Southern Carolina. And he absolutely blew up on Instagram, everything, social media, for just being a fantastic dunker, super athletic. And basketball social media ratings, if that made any sense, went up because of Zion Williamson. Because of him, more people were talking about high school basketball, more mixtapes, things like that. And everyone was super excited and super hyped for this Zion kid to come play. He obviously goes to Duke University, and Duke University has its highest college basketball ratings pretty much ever, because it's not because of RJ Barrett, who was a great player, Tyus Jones, some other guys. It is because of Zion Williamson. He is so box office. He is so electrifying that people will just be drawn towards him when he plays. Doesn't matter what team he was on. The New Orleans Pelicans currently have higher ratings, higher ticket sales than they've ever had, even when they had Anthony Davis on the team. Anthony Davis has played for that organization. Chris Paul, I think, technically played for the organization when they were like the New Orleans Hornets, something like that, or New Orleans Bobcats, something like that. Chris Paul technically was also on that team. This is the highest ratings they've ever had because of 19-year-old Zion Williamson, and they are in a playoff spot because of Zion Williamson. If you remember, for a good stretch, for about 4 or 5 weeks of the NBA season, I have it right here, the best play in basketball, efficiency-wise, statistically-wise, analytically-wise, was a Zion Williamson back-to-the-basket post-up move. Think about that. Zion Williamson, at 19 years old, had only been playing, 17 to 20 games at some point, coming off a torn meniscus, rookie, his team is not in a playoff spot, they're not even really in playoff contention. The best play in basketball analytically is not a LeBron James layup, not a James Harden 3, not a Steph Curry 3, not Rudy Gobert like layup, anything like that. It is a Zion Williamson back to the basket play. And that just blew my mind. And it's no surprise why the NBA wants him to play. He is, every single time Zion Williamson plays, he will be on national television. It doesn't matter who he plays. He could play the Suns, he could play the Magic, he could play the Nets, he could play the Kings. These bad teams. Zion Williamson is box office, he will be there. He is the first game, when the NBA returns on July 30th, the first game is Jazz Pelicans. And it's not because of the Jazz. It is because of Zion Williamson. Everybody wants to see him play. He is box office, and this brings me to a greater theme of how this Orlando bubble needs to work and how it's going to work for the NBA, and the NBA knows this. For this bubble to work, given all the risk, given all the talk, given all the delays, all the setbacks that have gone on, and even Adam Silver yesterday said a potential outbreak within the bubble could and probably would lead to another shutdown, and who knows what would even happen at that point, if they would even finish the season or anything like that. The NBA will go as far as their stars go. That is how the league has worked forever. The stars drive the NBA. And yes, every sport is a star-driven league, you could say. The NFL is a star-driven league. Not really, in comparison to the NBA. The MLB, in particular, is more of an organizational thing. The general managers, the owners, the brand comes first, it appears, in Major League Baseball, then the players. In football, it's kind of similar. The brand of the Cowboys, the ownership, Jerry Jones, the head coach even gets a lot more recognition and popularity and noteworthiness than some of the players do, especially compared to other sports, specifically baseball and basketball. Those kind of come before the players. In the NBA, the number one thing that drives the league is the players. Not even the product, not even the brand, not the owners, not the coaches. It has always been the players. It has always been the LeBron Jameses, the Magic Johnsons, the Larry Birds, the Michael Jordan. Like I've mentioned, the NBA was saved in the 80s by Magic and Bird, and then it blew up again because of Michael Jordan in the 90s and the late 90s. And then LeBron James bring it back. This whole transparent, this is how the NBA has worked. It's just gone from star to star, or from rivalry to rivalry. So it's no surprise that the stars have the easier schedules, and the NBA will go as far as they go. They know that if teams that don't have as many stars advance, the ratings will go down. And I'm not accusing the NBA of rigging the schedule. I have no idea how they came up with this schedule. But if you look at the teams with the easier schedules compared to the hardest, I already mentioned the Pelicans. The teams that have the hardest schedules don't have as many stars as the teams with the easier schedules, and I'll give you a few examples. The team with the hardest schedule of remaining is the Miami Heat. Not many stars. Jimmy Butler is a star, but not an A-list star, more of a B-list star. Not the most notable name if you talk to someone who just casually watches basketball. Number 2, the hardest schedule remaining in the NBA, Toronto Raptors, who just lost Kawhi Leonard and again are not a star-driven team, more of a coach-driven team, a defense-driven team. They're not going to run the score up similar to the Miami Heat. They're going to play defense, and they're led by a lot of solid role players and guys on the rise, like Pascal Siakam for the Heat, Bam Adebayo, Fred VanVleet for the Heat, Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson. Fred VanVleet obviously plays for the Raptors. Things like that. So they have the hardest schedules. Then it's the Denver Nuggets. Again, Jokic is a star, but similar to Jimmy Butler or a Pascal Siakam, more of a B-list star, even though I think he's a potential top 10 player in the NBA. Hasn't reached that superstar status, not necessarily playing-wise, he's met it playing-wise, but more popularity-wise. And then, of course, there's the other teams like Memphis, Portland, Phoenix, Washington. Those teams that don't have those star players have the harder schedules, have the hardest schedules remaining, because the NBA knows the more the stars advance, the more people will continue to watch. Now let's take a look at some of the teams with the easier schedules. I already mentioned the Pelicans. Philadelphia has the second easiest schedule in the NBA. What have I constantly said about the Philadelphia 76ers on this show? They are a super talented team, have two superstars in popularity with Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid. They just haven't been able to make it work. They haven't been able to make the on-court chemistry work. They haven't been able to kind of put all the pieces together that super talented roster. Do you want to know what will help with the chemistry, with the bringing together of this roster, with the reaching of the potential? A really easy schedule. Getting the confidence up of Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, blowing out teams will bring the confidence level up for the entire Philadelphia 76ers team. They have the second easiest schedule. The third easiest schedule in the entire NBA is the Boston Celtics, who this might come a little bit as a surprise since they're such a good team. But again, the NBA knows that the Celtics are such a big brand. They're super powerful. Jason Tatum was reaching that popularity, that superstar status before the shutdown. Kemba Walker's obviously a superstar. Jaylen Brown, Brad Stevens, the Celtic brand. Everything about the Celtics just brings superstar aura, so they have an easier schedule. They want them to advance. And don't be surprised when it gets to the playoffs. This will lead me into a continuing point, that the NBA not necessarily favors the superstar teams, but we've always used to seeing, when the playoffs start, the whistle gets tighter. One of the reasons why maybe James Harden hasn't always performed at his best in the playoffs, something like that. Do not be surprised in the NBA this season if when the Orlando bubble kicks off and after the play-in tournament and after the regular season games and after, once the playoffs start to begin, that the whistle stays the same, that James Harden does get those calls that he's used to, that LeBron's at the free throw line more, that Kawhi's at the free throw line more, Jason Tatum, Kemba Walker, Zion Williamson, because the NBA knows, like I keep saying, this bubble can only work if the stars advance. This bubble is only worth it for the NBA revenue-wise if people watch, if people tune in. And a lot of people will say, well, it'll be the only thing on, so people will watch. Not necessarily anymore. All the sports are starting to come back late July. Baseball will be on. The MLS will also be on. And the NHL will also be on. And they'll be in a super exciting kind of tournament style, almost like March Madness type of, form of their tournament that they're doing. There'll be plenty of sports to watch once July 30th hits. How does the NBA stay number one when they do that? Less of the Indiana Pacers, less of the Miami Heat, less of the Toronto Raptors, less of the Denver Nuggets, more of the Pelicans, more of the Sixers, more of the Celtics, more of the Lakers, Clippers, Bucks, teams like that who have those superstars that everybody knows, that everybody recognizes. The NBA wants more James Harden games. They want the Rockets versus the Lakers. They want the Pelicans versus the Lakers in the first round. And this just brings me back to the superstar effect of the NBA. Yes, Zion Williamson is already here. This whole thing is about Zion Williamson. They gave him the easier schedule on purpose or by accident or just how that's how the algorithm worked, because they want the first round matchup to be Pelicans, Lakers, LeBron, Zion, all over ESPN. Crazy stuff like that. And again, it'll just go as far as the stars go, and I can't wait to watch how the NBA regular season will kind of finish out. It'll be really interesting to see, will a team like the Miami Heat, the Toronto Raptors maybe go down in standings because of how hard their schedules are? Maybe Philly gets into the top 5, even maybe top 4 in the East. Will the Pelicans make the playoffs? I really do think that they're going to, just because, again, they have the easiest schedule comparison to the Grizzlies, who have one of the hardest. Portland has one of the hardest, and so does Phoenix. It kind of worked out in their favor that way. It's going to be a lot of fun to see. July 30th, the start of the bubble, is going to be absolutely awesome. The sports will finally be back, leading with the NBA. I can't wait to watch it. We're going to take a quick break. When we get back on the other side of the break, I'm going to be telling you about an interesting Tom Brady quote that came out today, and what does it mean about Tom Brady and the Patriot Way, and specifically Bill Belichick as well. We'll be right back after this break. It's the GSMC Sports Podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Just finished talking about strength of schedule in the NBA and how the Stars, kind of drive the league for the NBA. And let's switch gears here to the NFL. I saw an interesting quote. According to reports, Tom Brady apparently said this to his throwing coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. After trading for Rob Gronkowski, Tom Brady, who's obviously now the new quarterback of Tampa Bay after he finally left New England after about 20 years there, sort of one of the biggest moves in NFL history. He's obviously in Tampa Bay now. He said, "Football's fun again." Tom Brady apparently said that to throwing coach Tom House after the Bucs traded for Rob Gronkowski. And while this might seem like a really simple, meaningless, obvious quote from Tom, I think it has a lot of deeper meaning, and whether he was kind of like joking around or not, I think there's some seriousness to it. I don't think Tom Brady, specifically at the end of his Patriot tender, was having the greatest time playing football. It is confirmed that Rob Gronkowski was not having fun playing football anymore. He said after he retired that his body was kind of breaking down and he just wasn't having fun, wasn't enjoying, playing the game of football anymore in the National Football League. And I think Tom Brady was reaching that point specifically at the end of last year, that the day in, day out grind of the New England Patriots, the mentality of the Patriots was just getting down to him, and it was just bringing him down, and he needed a change of scenery. And instead of retiring like Gronk did, he just went to Tampa Bay, and Rob Gronkowski obviously followed him there after taking a year off. It's really interesting to see this quote, because I think this quote shows the deep-rooted issues that Tom Brady had with Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. There is a common phrase that everybody associates the Patriot dynasty with, and that's the Patriot Way. The Patriot Way is more associated to Bill Belichick and maybe even Robert Kraft than it is to Tom Brady. The Patriot Way is supposed to be this system that, makes anybody, undrafted, high pick, doesn't matter who you are, into a star. You fit your team, you do your job, as they like to say, in the Patriot land. And I want to make the argument that the Patriot Way doesn't actually exist, that it's all Tom Brady. Now, I know what you're thinking. Isn't this the whole debate of, is it Belichick, is it Brady? You're going to say it's Brady. No, I'm not going down that road. I'm making the argument that yes, this is more, the success of the Patriots is more Brady than Belichick, but in no way am I trying to diminish what Bill Belichick has accomplished as a coach, as a 6-time Super Bowl champion, obviously. But what I'm trying to say is that this whole phrase of the Patriot Way is an overrated statement. It's not actually true. If you look throughout the 20 years of the Patriots, they've had multiple different teams. They've won multiple different ways. Sometimes, specifically early in Tom's career, it was more ground and pound. Run the ball, play good defense. There was talented players on the defensive team. Teddy Bruschi, Ty Law was on there at one point, and talented guys on the offensive end. And then when you get to the middle part of Tom Brady's career, it kind of flips to more, instead of a defensive-driven team, to an offensive-driven team. That's when you get the, Rob Gronkowskis, the Randy Mosses, the Wes Welkers, Aaron Hernandez, those talented guys on the offensive end for Tom Brady to throw to. And then you kind of got to the more latter part of Tom Brady's career, where it was a little bit of both, specifically in that Rams Super Bowl, where it was just a low-scoring game. It kind of switched back to more of a defensive team. And eventually you saw that it kind of ran out, and Tom Brady ran out of gas, and the offense wasn't good enough, and Tom Brady obviously decided to leave. But what has been there's been two consistent things throughout this entire Patriot dynasty, and that's Tom Brady and that's Bill Belichick. And I want to make the argument that the Patriot Way isn't anything besides Tom Brady. Tom Brady is the Patriot Way. It's never been the Patriot Way. It's been the Tom Brady way. One of the staples of, the Patriots organization and this so-called phrase, the Patriot Way, is that any wide receiver, it works. Any offensive weapon works. Any running back works. Any, undrafted receiver like Julian Edelman, Wes Welkers, all those guys work. No matter who the Patriots get, they'll make it work. I don't think that the Patriots are the ones making it work. I think Tom Brady's making it work. I mentioned in my last episode that Russell Wilson is an outstanding, and Aaron Rodgers as well, is an outstanding quarterback because they make any receivers they have work. No matter who is with Russell Wilson, those guys' stats go up. They always have a good enough receiving core, even if they have less talented players around them. Specifically, Aaron Rodgers has done this for years and years, making guys who are maybe middle of the pack receivers into true number one receivers. Guys like Jordy Nelson. Devontae Adams is obviously super talented, but things like that, making guys, hit their ceiling, exceeding expectations has always been what Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson have done, not only in their career, but with the receivers and the weapons they've worked with. Now, why don't we call that the Green Bay Packer way? Or why don't we call that the Seattle Seahawks way? Those teams have had success. Both those guys have won Super Bowls before. Why is it not the, Seattle Seahawks way, the Green Bay Packer way? Why do we just give credit to Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson? Well, that's because the reason why those receivers are always so good is because of how good the quarterback is, because how good Aaron Rodgers is, because how good Russell Wilson is. He elevates their team. They fit in the category that I've talked about on the show before of players that elevate your team, that can overcome a bad receiving core, that can overcome a poor defense, poor coaching, things like that. They make anything work, they make anybody work, and they just consistently win games. Tom Brady is that same thing. Instead of giving Tom Brady credit and saying, look how good Tom Brady is as a receiver, he makes anybody work. He made Wes Welker work. He made Julian Edelman work. He made Mohamed Sanu work. He made, Rob Gronkowski. All these guys exceed expectations. None of these first round picks, none of these super talented guys. Rob Gronkowski was a second round pick. None of these, everyone just exceeded expectations. Everybody got better, and we just attributed it to, it's the Patriot way. They grinded the workouts, and I'm sure they grinded and they worked out. But maybe it's because of how good the quarterback is. Maybe it's because of how catchable the ball is. Maybe it's because how accurate it is. Maybe it's his attention to detail, his football IQ. And I think Tom might have gotten sick of that. And I've mentioned this before. One of the reasons when I think the Tom Brady leaving New England Patriots story started was I think it was after the Atlanta Falcons Super Bowl. I think it was after the Rams Super Bowl. It was after the LA Rams Super Bowl, because I think Jimmy Garoppolo was still on that team at that time. After that Super Bowl win, Jimmy Garoppolo was really close to being the heir apparent to Tom Brady, and there were rumors that, Bill Belichick, that were pretty much confirmed. Bill Belichick wanted to actually trade Tom Brady to San Francisco and Rob Gronkowski to Detroit and kind of do this full-fledged retool, rebuild, and hand all the keys off to Jimmy Garoppolo. Tom Brady obviously wasn't happy about that, went to Robert Kraft, demanded that Jimmy Garoppolo be moved, and Jimmy Garoppolo was moved for a very little price of a second-round pick to the San Francisco 49ers, and we all know what happened from there. Tom, got another Super Bowl against LA. I think when Jimmy Garoppolo was traded was after the Philadelphia Super Bowl, maybe, after that loss. It was either after the Atlanta Super Bowl or after the Eagles Super Bowl loss was when Jimmy Garoppolo was traded. We all know what happened after that. Tom Brady did get another Super Bowl with against the LA Rams, and then eventually has now moved on to Tampa Bay. And Jimmy Garoppolo just went to a Super Bowl with San Francisco. And I think when those reports came out to be true, I think that's when Tom Brady started to really think about, why am I still here? And really started to thinking about legacy. Now, Tom Brady has always been a live-in-the-moment type of guy, take it 1 year at a time. I'm not going to retire anytime soon. I'm not even thinking about that. And I think that might have changed this offseason. I really do believe Tom started to think about his legacy. What are the only holes in Tom Brady's legacy? There's not many. One of them is that, we all know that Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback of all time, but even he has some flaws in his, in his legacy. One of them is, can he win without the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick? And I think that was one of the reasons why he wanted to go to Tampa Bay. Another reason is, why does Tom Brady not get enough credit? We've always talked about this with the Patriot Way. Who deserves more credit, Bill Belichick or Tom Brady? And it always seems to lean just a little bit more Bill Belichick. The Patriot Way, which I believe is just a combination of how good Tom Brady is and Bill Belichick's coaching style, more Brady's play than Belichick's coaching style. I think Belichick's mentality is team first. It's all about we. Nobody gets more credit than anybody else. No one gets special treatment than anybody else. And I really do believe that at the end of his stint with the New England Patriots, Tom Brady wanted more credit. Tom Brady wanted some special treatment. He talked about on the Howard Stern show how he wanted to, he had an interview as soon as he, for anyone who doesn't know, when he left New England, went to Tampa Bay a couple days after announcing that signing. He went on an interview with Howard Stern, which is very unlike Tom Brady. Tom Brady's supposed to be Mr. Robot, suit and tie. He's a little bit more let loose now. Ever since that he's come to Tampa Bay, and I think this is maybe the real Tom Brady who's just been kind of masquerading in this business-like, suit style for the New England Patriots, and he's now more kind of like flip-flops and sandals type Tom Brady, which I like. And he said that at a certain point that the grind was just getting too much, he wasn't enjoying the game anymore, and he actually wanted to take some OTAs off, spend more time with his family, and that wasn't looked upon like smiling by, the New England Patriots organization. It's more a little bit more special treatment for Tom of, I'm going to take off the OTAs, I'll see you all at regular training camp. And, the Patriots organization wasn't thrilled about that. Probably Bill Belichick in particular was the one who was angered by that. And for me, that's why Tom Brady really wanted to leave. He wanted more credit, and he wanted to patch up any holes in his legacy. And again, with this whole aspect of the Patriot Way, I think it's an overrated term. I'm not necessarily calling Bill Belichick an overrated coach. I think he's one of the greatest coaches of all time. But again, we don't know what he's done without Tom Brady. We'll find out shortly. But this whole mantra, this whole phrase of, the Patriot Way, get rid of a guy a year early before it's a year too late, which, by the way, is not an original thing to the New England Patriots. Guys like Bill Parcells, the all-time greats, had been doing that forever, getting rid of a guys a year early before a year late to maximize trade value. Jimmy Johnson did that with the Dallas Cowboys as well. It kind of became sort of like, oh my God, the Patriots invented this when they really didn't. And also this sort of team first, we attitude, nobody gets special treatment, is sort of, that was considered the Patriot Way, when in reality the Patriot Way was just the Tom Brady way. It was Tom Brady making everything work. It was Tom Brady winning Super Bowls. It was Tom Brady being the best quarterback in the league year in, year out, making Wes Welker's work, making Julian Edelman's work, guys like that, exceeding expectations time and time again. So I want to just restate that we don't give Tom Brady enough credit. And this is when he, I think, really captures his moment and captures the credit. Because if Tampa Bay wins the Super Bowl this year, I can tell you all the credit's going to Tom Brady. It's not going to, Bruce Arians, not going to the, Jason Leitch, the general manager, not going to Mike Evans, not going to the Ndamukong Suh, not going to Chris Godwin, anybody like that. It's Tom Brady who will get the credit, and I think that's one of the reasons why he wanted to go to Tampa Bay. He wants to lead a team to a championship and get all the credit, which is fine. He deserves it. He's an alpha athlete, the greatest quarterback of all time. Either him or Michael Jordan is the greatest team sport athlete of all time. And for him to get almost minimal credit for the Patriot dynasty, I can understand why he'd be a little angry or pissed off about that. So I really do believe that this whole Patriot Way, again, statement has just been the Tom Brady way, and I think we're going to see that when he goes to Tampa Bay, when he makes the Mike Evans exceed expectations, the Ronald Jones, the running back, Gronk, O.J. Howard, Tyler Brait, all those guys will do better than they did with a Jameis Winston. They'll all have career years because of Tom Brady, and again, I think he's out to prove that this year with Tampa Bay. We're going to take another quick break. On the other side, I'm going to be talking about some Aaron Rodgers, an interesting quote an analyst said about him, and we'll get into it on the other side of this break, so make sure you stick around for that. And also make sure to stick around for the end of the episode. I'll be giving you my top 10 NFL teams on paper, the most talented rosters in the league. Who are they? Where do I rank them? I'll be giving you guys that at the end of the episode, so make sure you stick around for that as well, and we'll be right back after this short break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I just got finished talking about Tom Brady, an interesting quote that came from him about how, he's having fun playing football again in his new change of scenery with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I want to segue to another quarterback who I believe will eventually leave his current franchise, and that's Aaron Rodgers. And Brandon Marshall, who is a football player now turned analyst for, I believe, Fox Sports 1, said recently that the Green Bay Packer organization has failed Aaron Rodgers. The fact that Aaron Rodgers has only gotten one Super Bowl in all of his years with Green Bay is pathetic, and it's just they've underachieved. And while I agree with you that Aaron Rodgers only having one Super Bowl is sort of a failure of his career, you could say, but it's the National Football League. You don't know how things are going to go. You don't know who's going to be in your division, how good other teams are going to be. Aaron Rodgers didn't know that he would be walking into the NFL when the greatest dynasty in pretty much all of sports, the New England Patriot dynasty, would be going on. He didn't know he was going to get drafted by Green Bay. He wanted to be drafted by San Francisco, number 1. The National Football League is always something that has been unpredictable, so I don't know about all of that. But he did bring up an interesting point. Has the Green Bay Packer organization failed Aaron Rodgers? And we've talked about this almost throughout the entirety of Aaron Rodgers' career. And I'll tell you why I think they might have actually failed him, and then I'll sort of restate some points that I made in, I think maybe even my first ever episode or my second ever episode of why Aaron Rodgers might leave, and I'll maybe talk about some teams that he could potentially go to again quickly. But the amount of times that Aaron Rodgers has played with a top 10 defense in the league. Now, I know what the league is now. It has always been, or it hasn't, the classic saying, defense wins championships. Do you really believe in that? I really do. I think a lot of the best coaches are actually more defensive coaches than offensive coaches. And I understand that the current wave in the NFL is to get a quarterback, get a coach who's this quarterback guru, quarterback whisperer, who will always, develop your guy and make him into the next Tom Brady or something like that. But I feel like more oftentimes than not, the whole quarterback guru mantra and phrase doesn't actually work out. If you can try to think of some of the best coaches in the NFL, who are these so-called quarterback gurus and where are they now? Sean McVay was a quarterback guru, and I would say he's the best one out of all of them. Had a fantastic year with Jared Goff. Year 1, they obviously went to the Super Bowl when it was, or no, maybe it was his second year, Sean McVay? Yeah, second year with the LA Rams. They obviously went to the Super Bowl, had an incredible season. Jared Goff was also great. And kind of since then, they've all fallen off. Goff has fallen off. Not necessarily that Sean McVay's coaching has fallen off, but it's not at the same level that it was. Adam Gase is a so-called quarterback whisperer, and I talked about him in my last episode. That's great and all that you're this quarterback guru, and you worked with Peyton Manning, but it doesn't help the entire team when, because of your coaching style and because of the way you lead the locker room as a coach, players like Jamal Adams want to leave because you don't deal with the defense and they don't trust you to lead a winning organization and be, the face of a winning team, to be the coach of a winning team. Do you consider Kyle Shanahan, the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers, a quarterback guru? Some people do, but I really don't. They actually run the ball more than they throw it. I think Kyle Shanahan's just one of the best offensive minds in football. He schemes guys open with wide receivers. It's not just about the quarterback, so I wouldn't put him on that list. But if you look at some of the best coaches in the NFL, John Harbaugh was a special teams coach. He's also a little bit more defensive than he is offensive. Bill Belichick's obviously a defensive head coach. Mike Tomlin's a little bit more defensive for Pittsburgh. Andy Reid, I wouldn't consider him a quarterback guru. I would consider him more of just an offensive genius. His whole mantra isn't just a quarterback whisperer or anything like that. It's more of just offensive scheme. So things like that. But when you talk about, these top 10, how many times has Aaron Rodgers played with a top 10 defense, and why defense matters so much? I actually think it matters more for quarterbacks, and it's better for great quarterbacks to play with a defensive head coach than an offensive head coach, because if you have a great quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, or Tom Brady, people like that, they will make the offense work. Guys like Russell Wilson, like I talked about in my last segment, and Aaron Rodgers, just make the offense work. They're always going to put up points. They're going to make any receiver they have work. They'll get you to 21, 24 points pretty consistently in an NFL game. And you need a head coach who leans more defensively, because then they are the ones who focus in and it's, make a defense that will limit the opponent to a 20. So just keep you in the game sort of thing. Because if you have a defensive head coach that can just keep your team in the game, and you have someone like an Aaron Rodgers or, a Patrick Mahomes, a Lamar Jackson, Tom Brady, a Drew Brees, if you're just in the game in the fourth quarter, you have a better chance, likely than not, that you're going to win that game because you have the superior quarterback on the field. So I always think that for young quarterbacks in particular as well, just keep them in the game and let them develop. When it comes to Aaron Rodgers and younger quarterbacks like Tua and Burrow, people like that I actually prefer to have a defensive head coach if you have a good quarterback, because if you just keep the game close, you'll be good. And if you're looking at how many times has Aaron Rodgers played with a top-tier defense, only one time is it 100% confirmed that Aaron Rodgers has played with a top 10 defense, and that was in 2010. You could also make the argument that they were a top 10 defense in 2009. Some people have them at number 9 in some rankings, but I found a lot of people that actually had them in the 12 to 14 range as well. But if you're wondering what happened in 2010 when Aaron Rodgers played with a top-tier defense, a top 10 defense, that was the year Aaron Rodgers won the Super Bowl, and I think he also won the MVP that year. So if you give Aaron Rodgers a top-tier defense, he'll take the offense and he'll make it work. He'll make it a Super Bowl contending offense. And it feels like that Green Bay hasn't got that message, and they've never gotten that message. They went from Mike McCarthy, who was an offensive head coach, but also a little bit more, he's got some defensive prowess, to Matt LaFleur, who is a pure offensive head coach, doesn't, work a lot with the defense. And again, Aaron, the team went 13-3 last year, but like I've mentioned this before, Aaron Rodgers' stats went down, led the league in throwaways. They were kind of more of like a 10-6 team masquerading as a 13-3 team, maybe even a 9-7 team. They led the league in, wins by one score, which just again proves my point that if you have the game be close, Aaron Rodgers will figure out a way to win the game most of the time than not. But then when you get to the NFC Championship game and your defense can't get a stop against San Francisco, Aaron Rodgers is in such a deep hole that he can't crawl you all the way back. So a top-tier defense matters when it comes to the NFL careers of quarterbacks. It's not all just offense. Tom Brady, Drew Brees, and Peyton Manning all played with a top 10 defense at least 5 times in their NFL career, and most of them, they were even 7. In Tom Brady's case, it was over 10 for times they played with a top 10 defense, and that shows. That's why Aaron Rodgers has more Super Bowls. That's why Peyton Manning has more Super Bowls. Drew Brees also has one, but that's been for different reasons. But there's a reason why traditionally that Drew Brees led, Saints teams have gone farther, especially more recently, than, when Aaron Rodgers led Green Bay Packer team. The Saints organization has been considered better than Green Bay. And then when you get to, the classic saying is, what have you done for me recently, not just overall? So we've known that in the past that Green Bay hasn't gotten Aaron the best weapons, the best roster, the best defense, even the best head coach necessarily. What have the Green Bay Packers done for Aaron Rodgers recently? Well, recently they gave him a big contract extension, so that's great. And then the following year, after going 3-13, and Aaron Rodgers throwing a ton of touchdowns and only 4 interceptions, yes, his stats went a little bit down, led the league in throwaways like I keep mentioning, but still had a fantastic year nonetheless. Went 13-3, went to the NFC Championship game to repay Aaron Rodgers and to take the next step as the franchise. Instead of getting him a great receiver, a great defensive player, even great offensive lineman, they decided to draft his replacement, Jordan Love, with the first pick and another running back, the second pick. Which just shows to me that the Packers just I almost feel like they're overvaluing Aaron in a necessary, because I don't think they're taking Aaron Rodgers for granted, because I think they love Aaron Rodgers, and I think the organization is extremely thrilled that he's there. And while they might have drafted his replacement, I don't think they're forcing Aaron Rodgers out of the Green Bay Packer organization like they kind of forced Brett Favre out. If you remember when Brett Favre was drafted, I think there was more pressure and urgency to see Aaron Rodgers on the field and replace Brett Favre, even though the fans didn't agree with it, than there is a Jordan Love. Because, for example, everybody in the organization, when they drafted Aaron, they loved Aaron Rodgers. They wanted Aaron Rodgers to get on the field as soon as possible, and they replaced Brett Favre rather quickly. I don't think that same love necessarily translates to Jordan Love and Aaron. I don't think they're in as a rush to see Jordan Love on the field. Again, I've mentioned this before, though. I don't think he's going to sit, for 3+ years. I think 2 more years, and Aaron Rodgers and Green Bay will go their separate ways. But again, to repay Aaron Rodgers for his continuous carrying of the franchise, they drafted his replacement and a running back. Aaron Rodgers' career stats: 64.6 career completion percentage, ridiculous. Over 46,000 yards, 364 touchdowns to only 84 interceptions, and he has the greatest quarterback rating of all time at a 102.4. He's one of only 2 quarterbacks to have a career QBR of over 100, the other one being Russell Wilson, who's just right behind him. And he's done all that with only once having a top 10 defense. Once. He has gone 113-60 as an NFL quarterback with only having a top defense once. Won a Super Bowl the year he had the top defense, like I mentioned. And this is why, I'll close on this point, why I think Aaron Rodgers is on his way out. I think he's starting to realize this. The narrative has always been around Aaron Rodgers that Green Bay's not doing enough, but it really picked up after this draft. And now he has an easy escape route. They've drafted his replacement. They didn't get him another receiver. They didn't get him a defensive player. They didn't get him a defensive head coach. And he's done all these things for them, gone 13-3, all the yards, no interceptions, doesn't turn the ball over. And to repay him, Green Bay just drafts his replacement, gets another running back, gets another head coach that who knows if Aaron really signed off on. And there's been some, reports that their relationship, that being with Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers, isn't great. And I keep saying this, and I'll say it again. I am not going to be surprised, and I'm almost expecting that Aaron Rodgers in the next 2 seasons is going to leave Green Bay. I really do believe he wants to go to California and be a quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, LA Rams, or LA Chargers, with the Rams being the favorites. I said, I think in one of my first episodes, that there are some teams that could sign Aaron, a team like, Chicago or maybe one of the New York teams, but I really do believe Aaron Rodgers has never wanted to be a Green Bay Packer. I think he's fine being there now, but if Aaron Rodgers could always have picked at the beginning of his career where he wanted to go number 1 overall, not just because to be the number 1 overall pick, because he wanted to play for the San Francisco 49ers. And if Jimmy Garoppolo takes a step back for San Francisco this year, and the 49ers have realized that Jimmy G has hit their ceiling, similar to what's happening right now really with Jared Goff and Sean McVay, Aaron Rodgers could really want to go back to where he wanted to be all along in San Francisco, or a team like the Los Angeles Rams. If, Jared Goff continues to not improve and the Rams keep going down and lower in the standings, maybe the Cardinals, like I predict, will pass them in their division, and then all of a sudden, Sean McVay wants to find a new quarterback before his job is on the line, and in could come Aaron Rodgers. I'm not going to be surprised that happens, because time and time again, I agree with Brandon Marshall on this point here, and everyone wants to just attack Aaron Rodgers. Everyone has been attacking Aaron Rodgers. You kind of have to pick a side when it comes to Aaron Rodgers' career. You either love Aaron Rodgers or you think he's overrated and he's not as good. The overrated crowd will say, well, look, he had Mike McCarthy. He's a good head coach, and they gave him Devontae Adams, and the division has never been great, and that's all fine and good. But if you put Aaron Rodgers with Bill Belichick as a head coach, if Aaron Rodgers 10 times in his career, like Tom Brady, 10 plus times in his career, had a top 10 defense, Aaron Rodgers will be a multiple time Super Bowl champion. If Aaron Rodgers got to play with Randy Moss, Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez, Wes Welker, even Julian Edelman to a certain extent, all of a sudden Aaron Rodgers turns into the 4-time Super Bowl champion. Or even if you take what New Orleans has, if he could play with a Michael Thomas, have a Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara on offensive line there, a Sean Payton as a head coach, Cameron Jordan on the defensive end. Aaron Rodgers has never had these players ever in his career. Green Bay has obviously never been a hot spot for free agents, but not because of, it's almost because of lack of trying. Like, Green Bay understands that they're not a hot spot, so they just kind of roll over and play dead when it comes to the free agent market. They're just like, oh, we're not going to sign anybody to big money. Why can't a Green Bay Packers go trade for a Stephon Diggs, who went to the Bills? Why can't they go trade for an Odell Beckham Jr., when he got traded for Cleveland? Why aren't they in on all of these trades that are happening with receivers, with offensive linemen, with corners? Why weren't they in on the Jalen Ramsey sweepstakes, the Marcus Peters sweepstakes? Things like that. Why aren't they drafting a receiver? Why didn't they draft, the best available receiver that was on the board in the draft? Why trade up for Jordan Love? Things like that all manifest into this weird relationship that Green Bay has always had with Aaron Rodgers, which is Aaron Rodgers is this cool California kid. I can carry the franchise. Just get me some weapons, get me some defense. And Green Bay loves Aaron, and they pay Aaron. They make him the highest paid without even being asked. Like, they know that they have to give him all the money. There wasn't some holdout or anything like that. They've always been good to Aaron financially. But then you've come to the other side of the coin, which is drafting and free agency and building a team around him and getting a good head coach. and they've just never been able to do that. They've never been able to get Aaron a true number one. Davante Adams is great, and I think he's super talented, but they've never been able, I think he's only as good as Aaron Rodgers can make him. Like, I think he's maybe a top 10, top 15 receiver in the league, but if you put Davante Adams with, on the Jets, do you think that Davante Adams is what the stats are now? I don't think so. I think Aaron Rodgers, again, like a Russell Wilson, and like a Russell Wilson-Tyler Lockett situation, the stats go up because of how good your quarterback is. And yes, I believe Green Bay has failed Aaron Rodgers in that regard. Instead, they've always asked Aaron to make these receivers exceed expectations. Jimmy Graham we got Jimmy Graham, who's way past his prime. Can you make him what he was in New Orleans when nobody can do that? Can you make Davante Adams into a true number one receiver like he's done? We're gonna get rid of Jordy Nelson, but we're gonna get a replacement, somebody random. Can you help them exceed expectations? And Aaron has just kept doing it. And similar to how Tom Brady was kind of fed up at the end, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to get fed up, especially with a replacement down the line. Tom Brady took the route of telling them to trade Jimmy Garoppolo, and then he was still fed up afterwards. I don't even think Aaron would tell them to trade Jordan Love 2 or 3 years down the line. I think he would just leave to a California team, again, like San Francisco or the LA Rams. But it's going to be really interesting to see the Aaron Rodgers-Green Bay relationship pan out, as it's always has been. But I definitely agree with Brandon Marshall that the Green Bay Packers have failed Aaron Rodgers in his career 100%. We're going to take one final break. On the other side of the break, I'm going to be giving you guys my top 10 NFL rosters on paper. Who are the most talented NFL teams? Forget the coach, GM, organization, where you play. Just who has the most talent in the league. Okay? And we'll be doing that right when we get back from this break. It's the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for listening so far.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network, with the final segment of today's episode. And I saw something on PFF, I think yesterday, where they released their top 10 rosters in the NFL just off pure talent standpoint. I didn't agree with all of them. I agree with some of them. So I'm just going to be giving you guys my top 10 rosters on paper. So this takes into everything. This isn't necessarily my top 10 teams in the league by any stretch of the imagination. I think some teams will win more than others on this list. This just takes into account who has the most talent on the roster. This has nothing to do with coaching, general manager, like where you play, what's your division like, for example. So this is not win-loss. This is not 10 teams in the NFL who are the best. This is just who has the most talent in the league, who are the most talented rosters, and let's get right into it. At number 10, I have the Dallas Cowboys. They would be higher on this list if this was last year, but they lost a lot of people in free agency, specifically Byron Jones. They got more talent on the offensive end when they drafted CeeDee Lamb. I love Amari Cooper. I like him, don't love him, actually. I should have said like. I like Amari Cooper. I don't love him. I don't think he's a true number one receiver. I think he's a 1A to a perfect B. If he can be paired with someone like for example, if CeeDee Lamb blossoms into like an NFL superstar wide receiver, that'd be perfect. I think Amari Cooper would be a perfect 2 to someone like a DeAndre Hopkins on another team or something like that. It's hard for me to see Amari Cooper consistently torching the best cornerbacks in the league, like Stephon Gilmore's, Byron Jones's, people like that. So I have the Cowboys coming in at number 10. I still like their defense. I liked DeMarcus Lawrence. I love their linebackers, Jalen Smith, and Van Der Esch. I think they have maybe the best young linebacking core in the league. They can really fly. They can really move. There was obviously some injuries last year as well. When it comes to win-loss, I've said the Cowboys are going to go 9-7. I like Mike McCarthy, the head coach. Again, don't love him. I think Dak Prescott's a good quarterback. Don't think he's great. Love Ezekiel Elliott. Love the offensive line of the Cowboys. They're definitely a super talented roster. The Cowboys always seem to have a ton of talent. Mostly, for the most part, on the offensive end. They've always been more of an offensive organization just throughout the years than defensive, but they do have some good defensive pieces. A lot of offensive talent, a lot of weapons. Number 10 on my list for most talented teams, rosters on paper. At number 9, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think the Steelers are a really talented team. I feel like if they weren't a really talented team, they wouldn't have gone 8-8 last year with Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph as their quarterbacks. I love James Conner. I think he's a little bit underrated. I think he's actually a really good running back. I think the Steelers have a great offensive line. I love Juju Smith-Schuster. I think he's kind of falling into that underrated category. He didn't have the greatest year last year, and people kind of make it seem that now he's not this great number 1 receiver anymore, and he's more of a number 2 like Antonio Brown used to call him out on social media for. But in reality, I think it's just Juju Smith-Schuster had Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges as his quarterbacks over the entire span of the year, which would bring any receiver's numbers down. So I think that's one of those reasons why Juju had more of a down year. They got Eric Ebron in free agency. They drafted Claypool, who I think is an underrated steal out of Notre Dame. I think he's a great receiver. Ben Roethlisberger's coming back, and even though I don't think Ben Roethlisberger is what he used to be, he's still a super talented arm talent guy. He can super strong arm, can throw the ball down the field, and if he comes back even to maybe an 85% version of what Ben Roethlisberger used to be, their team will be better than last year, and he's still a very talented quarterback in this league. So I have the Steelers at number 9. They also have guys like Watt on the defensive end. They have Dupree, things like that. They have a ton of talent on the defensive end. Another great young defensive team, one of the best defenses in the league. I think they just have a really talented roster overall. So they're coming in at number 9. At number 8 is the Indianapolis Colts. I think the Indianapolis Colts have one of the best rosters in the league. They drafted incredible. If I had done an episode right after the draft of teams who won the draft, the Colts would absolutely be up there. They didn't have a first round pick. They added DeForest Buckner, one of the best defensive tackles in the league, probably second to only Aaron Donald. They got, they have Marlon Mack in the backfield, one of the best offensive lines in the league, led by Quentin Nelson. T.Y. Hilton drafted Michael Pittman Jr., who reminds me a lot of Michael Thomas, Darius Leonard in the, kind of not backfield, but defensive backfield almost. In the linebacking core, they have a pretty good defensive line, obviously now led by DeForest Buckner. I don't believe in Phillip Rivers necessarily, but I think with a good offensive line, Phillip Rivers is still talented, sort of like Ben Roethlisberger is, still can throw the ball, doesn't have a noodle arm or anything like that. So I absolutely love the Colts' roster, and I think they're going to be pretty good this year. I think I have them also going at 9-7, just finishing behind the Titans and the Texans. But again, with this super talented roster with the Indianapolis Colts, great offensive line. Jonathan Taylor was also drafted. Marlon Mack, 2 good running backs. I think they have 2 good receivers now in Pittman and T.Y. Hilton. Great offensive line, pretty good front 7. I think a secondary is a little bit of a weakness of theirs. But again, I still think they have a top 10 roster in the NFL from top to bottom. At number 7, I have the Los Angeles Chargers, who did not make the PFF top 10. Which I was shocked. I think the Chargers have one of the best rosters in the league. Maybe I'm crazy. But when you look at their defense, Melvin Ingram, Joey Bosa, Derwin James, they got the cornerback from Denver, from blanking on his name now. Did Chris Harris go to the Chargers? I think it's Chris Harris who went to the Chargers. They have 3 good corners now, 2 good pass rushers, decent linebackers. They drafted one at the end of the first round, Murray, out of Oklahoma, who's also fantastic. And then you go to the offensive end, they have Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Eckler, who's a great running back. I think they have a decent offensive line, not great. I think Justin Herbert's a talented quarterback. I think he's got a great arm. I think he can move. He reminds me more of a more accurate version of Josh Allen. I think we'll see him play later in the year. I think the Chargers have one of the most talented rosters top to bottom. I really do believe they have a Super Bowl level roster talent-wise. On paper, I don't understand why they didn't make the top 10 for Pro Football Focus. Again, 2 good pass rushers, 3 good corners, a fantastic safety who kind of does a little bit of everything, sort of like Jamal Adams and Derwin James. I think he's absolutely incredible. And then on the offensive end, again, Mike Williams, great big tall receiver. Love Keenan Allen. Hunter Henry as well as a tight end. If he can stay healthy, he's great. And Austin Eckler. I think the Chargers roster is a Super Bowl level roster. I have them coming in at number 7. At number 6 is a team I talked about a lot roster wise, and that's the Cleveland Browns. Again, they are like the Noah's Ark of football teams in offense. 2 good receivers, OBJ, Jarvis Landry. 2 good running backs, Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb. 2 good tackles now, Tristan Wirfs, Jack Conklin. 2 good tight ends, too. I mean, David Njoku and Austin Hooper, who's arguably one of the best tight ends in the league. Baker Mayfield is a talented enough quarterback. And then on the defensive end as well, Olivier Vernon, Myles Garrett. In the secondary, they have Ward as well, and Greedy Williams, too. I mean, just everywhere, they have talented guys. And I really do believe they're one of the most talented rosters in the league. Again, if these other teams, the next 5 I'm going to mention, are just a little bit better than Cleveland, I don't think there's a huge gap between the Browns at number 6 and maybe 5 through 2 here. I think they have one of the most talented rosters in the league. I want to say they're one of the most talented offenses. They're really close. Them, the Chiefs, and the Bucks, and maybe even the Saints as well, have really talented offenses, and the Ravens as well. The Browns are up there. They can compete with anybody in the league talent-wise. If they can get the coach right, if Kevin Stefanski is the guy, and if Baker Mayfield can have a big bounce-back season, take a big leap, throw for a lot of touchdowns, a lot of yards, bring those interceptions down, Browns can make a lot of noise for once in their franchise history. At number 5, I have the Kansas City Chiefs defending Super Bowl champions. One of the best offenses in the league. I think Tyreek Hill is maybe the best receiver in the league at what he does. Best speed receiver in the league. They have, obviously, Travis Kelce, who's the best tight end in the league. Great offensive line. Patrick Mahomes is the most talented quarterback in the league. More talented than Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Lamar Jackson. He's number 1, best quarterback and most talented. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is who they drafted, who I think he was the best running back in the draft. Would have been my pick. Great in the running and passing game. He reminds me a lot of a bigger Darren Sproles. And with that in the Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid Chiefs system, that's going to be scary to watch. Wouldn't surprise me if he won Offensive Rookie of the Year. He'd be probably my bet, except for maybe a quarterback like Tua or Joe Burrow. First non-quarterback Offensive Rookie of the Year I would definitely lean towards would be Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I have the Chiefs at number 5. Just an all-around super talented roster. It's why they won the Super Bowl, led by maybe the most talented player in the league, Patrick Mahomes. At number 4, I have the San Francisco 49ers. I do believe they're a little bit more talented than the Kansas City Chiefs. They obviously just met in the Super Bowl. I think the Chiefs have a better offense, but I think that the 49ers have a better defense. And I think the gap between the 49ers defense and the Chiefs defense is bigger than the gap between the Kansas City offense and the San Francisco defense, if that makes any sense. The 49ers have the best defense in the league. You could argue maybe Baltimore has an also really good defense as well, but I would probably give it to San Francisco. Bosa is maybe the best defensive end in the entire league. They have a pretty decent secondary, great linebackers, and on the offensive end, they have a great team as well. Just a lot of guys, a lot of scheme fits, a lot of, Deebo Samuel, who's obviously hurt now. Jimmy Garoppolo's the most talented, but I think he's really talented from a football IQ standpoint, similar to, the Dak Prescott's of the world, like I've mentioned before. San Francisco just is overall a really talented team. They lost to Forrest Buckner this year, but they drafted a defensive tackle to replace him, who apparently they love. Brandon Ayuk as well as a really talented wide receiver coming out of Arizona State. George Kittle, obviously. George Kittle or Travis Kelce. I just said Travis Kelce. He's the best tight end in the league. I'd probably take Kelce just by a little bit. I think Kelce might be a little bit faster. George Kittle's obviously a lot more physical. Kittle's obviously probably number 2, maybe even number 1 best tight end in the league. Overall, extremely talented team. San Francisco, they come in at number 4. And now let's get to the top 3 rosters talent-wise in the NFL. At number 3, I have the New Orleans Saints, who only got better in the offseason. They added Emmanuel Sanders at wide receiver. I think their biggest need is a tight end. If they could get a tight end, that'd be great. They have a decent offensive line. I think it's good enough. I think Drew Brees is still really talented. Alvin Kamara is an extremely versatile back, top 5 running back in the league. Mike Thomas is a top 5 to top 7 receiver in the league. Just mentioned Emmanuel Sanders. They're pretty talented on the defensive end, but this is really coming from the offensive weapons, why they're so talented. I think the Saints will win their division. It'll be close with them in Tampa Bay, who I'll get to in a minute. But I do believe that, the Saints are just an overall, maybe one of the most talented offenses in the league. Maybe only second to, offense-wise, strictly. They're really close with, the Chiefs and also maybe the Ravens offensive-wise, and I'll get into the Bucks as well next. But Saints overall just an extremely talented team on paper. They're one of those teams that are one of these teams on this list that is extremely talented and has the good head coach and good organization, which is why they're consistently good every year. So the Saints are coming in at number 3. At number 2, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I really do believe they're the second most talented team in the league. PFF had them at 5. I see Mike Evans. I see Gronk. I see 3 good tight ends, 2 good receivers, a great quarterback, Tom Brady, decent running back, Ronald Jones, the lead leaguer in sacks last year, Shaquille Barrett, one of the best young linebacking cores in the league, the Dominican Sue on the defensive end. I think they're one of the most talented teams in the league. I have them coming in at number 2, led by, Tom Brady isn't the most talented anymore, but Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, O.J. Howard, Rob Gronkowski, Ronald Jones, Brait, Shaquille Barrett, Devin White is also on that team, the Dominican Sue, just everywhere, and I think they're also in the Jamal Adams sweepstakes. They haven't gotten them yet, obviously. At number 2, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think they're one of the most talented teams in the league. I thought they would have been higher than number 5 on PFF's list, but they're coming in at number 2 for me. And finally, the most talented team in the league, I agree with PFF. I really do believe it's the Baltimore Ravens. I don't think there's a hole on this team. There's not a huge need. If there was any need on this team, it would be wide receiver. I think they need a true number 1A superstar receiver. But the way they run the ball with Mark Ingram, drafted J.K. Dobbins, Lamar Jackson's obviously incredible. Fantastic offensive line, fantastic defense, maybe the best in the league. Marcus Peters, guys like that. Earl Thomas, if he stays on the team. The Ravens are just extremely talented. I think Colin Cowherd said on his show a couple weeks ago that they might go 16-0. I wouldn't go that far, but it wouldn't surprise me if they had the best record in the league. They're so talented. It'll just be what happens in the playoffs for them. I think they're going to win their division rather easily. I think they might take a step back because their division got better, but I do believe they'll be in the driver's seat, maybe even the driver's seat in the AFC as well, just competing with the Chiefs really for the best team in the AFC. Most talented team in the league, no doubt for me, is the Baltimore Ravens. Again, not a really major hole. If anything, a true number 1 wide receiver would help them. Good tight ends, best running game in the league, one of the best defenses, great secondary. Ravens have it all. That is going to be it for this episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you follow us on all social medias, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Leave us a 5-star review and subscribe to the podcast. We really appreciate it. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all in the next episode.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.